Hey, Isaac, can I see
Yes.
your chair?
Seat, like switch seats or just the chair?
Yeah, is it?
Oh, you know you can adjust these.
I know, but I never.
Are we ready? Okay, while some activity is going on behind me, I'm pleased to call to order the regular. You guys have my table.
What?
The town council meeting for February 18th. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Fredericks. Councilmember Ryan is absent. Councilmember Thier. Vice Mayor Nick Farr
Isn't?
and Mayor Wellner.
Yes, here. Thank you. All right, so we'll begin our meeting with our what? We'll begin our meeting with public comment on items not on the agenda. Can you provide instruction, Lee?
Yes, if you're calling in on Zoom and would like to make a comment during this meeting, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom, which will indicate to me you would like to make a comment. You can find the raise hand button on your webinar controls bar on the bottom of your Zoom window or smartphone screen. If you're calling in using a phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand.
Okay, so do we have anyone in the room or online who's interested in making a comment?
Seeing none.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we'll close the public comment period. And I see it doesn't appear to be any consent calendar items this time. So we can move straight to action items. So our first action item is selecting the chair and vice chair of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force for the coming year. Do I have any, why don't we start with the staff report? There we go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an annual item that the council has previously given direction. It would like to consider this annual appointment during the second council meeting in February. And like I said, it's an annual appointment, so the term is for 1 year, and the governing resolutions are attached to your staff report, but the primary factor to consider in your appointment of the chair and vice chair is that the chair is meant to be a member of the council, but the vice chair does not have to be. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, great. Do we have any questions for the staff regarding the nomination process? No? Okay, any public comment on DEI nominations?
Seeing none.
All right. So this comes back to the council for discussion. Does any council member want to propose nominees for these two positions?
Has anyone expressed interest who is on the committee? It's red. Into the mic, is that the problem? I can do that. I asked if anybody who is on the DITF has expressed interest in either being the chair or the vice chair.
So I think Tina would like to be vice chair,
Okay.
and I'm interested in being chair.
Chair. Okay. All right. Well, are there any other recommendations? If not, I'm happy to nominate. So I will move that we nominate for another year Councilmember Thier as chair of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force and Tina Packaday as vice chair.
Second.
Thank you for the second. Any discussion before we vote? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan is absent. Councilmember Thier.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Nick Farr
Yes.
and Mayor Wellner.
Yes. Okay, very good. All right, the next item has to do with a proposed stakeholder process for determining what phase 2 of Caltrans project on Tiburon Boulevard will look like. Can I have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As council is aware, Caltrans is planning a major pavement project on State Route 131 or Tiburon Boulevard from the US 101 interchange all the way to downtown Tiburon. During the design phase, particularly in 2025, Caltrans received a lot of input from various stakeholders regarding various design elements of the project, with a lot of the input related to bicycle, pedestrian, and transit-related use within that project corridor. As a result of the complexity of the issues raised during this process, Caltrans chose to advance a two-phase process for the project, with phase one focused on pavement rehabilitation, and phase two with addressing many of the issues that were raised during that time period in 2025 related to bicycle transit and other possible safety features. The phase one part of the project, the pavement rehabilitation design, is complete, and the project, we believe, is out to bid. The county Public Works Department has taken the lead on proposing a process for Caltrans to gather input from the stakeholders interested in the phase two of the project, and they described that process in a letter that is attached as Exhibit 1 to this staff report. In short, the county is proposing hiring a facilitator to work with all the stakeholders through a process where consensus could be reached and direction or suggestions could be given to Caltrans as they begin the design and implementation of phase two. Today, council, they sent a letter last week, and I forwarded it to council the day I received it, and they sent similar letters to Reed Union School District, City of Belvedere, the Tiburon Peninsula Traffic Relief JPA, Town of Tiburon, and of course the county is involved, and they're seeking feedback from those agencies on the proposed process. Just to briefly summarize what they anticipate a facilitator providing is in support is coordinating and facilitating task force meetings, supporting collaborative decision-making among participating agencies, designing and implementing targeted community outreach activities, documenting stakeholder input, areas of agreement, and outstanding issues, and preparing a summary report reflecting a broadly supported scope and configuration that would be suitable to make it through the Caltrans design process. Again, the county is seeking input on this process. In their letter, they anticipate that the cost for the facilitation would be between $100,000 and $150,000, and they propose sharing that among participating stakeholders based on a mutual agreement. So, with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Okay. Before we jump into questions, can you repeat again who the agencies are who that was directed to, that letter?
So, of course, it came from the County of Marin, so
Right.
the County of Marin, the Reed Union School District,
Okay.
the Bus JPA, Tiburon Peninsula Traffic Relief JPA,
Mhm.
City of Belvedere, Town of Tiburon, and perhaps TAM. I'm not sure if TAM received a letter or not.
Okay. All right, very good. So, questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you know whether the county is also asking for the city of Belvedere to cover a portion of this 100 to 150K, or whether Tiburon would be required to cover Belvedere's portion?
No, a separate letter was sent to the City of Belvedere.
Okay,
seeking
thank
the
you.
same input. Yep.
Just, and just
Please.
confirm again, the stakeholders that we just mentioned are the potential bodies that would share the cost of the consultant,
That is what is suggested in the letter that the county sent. Yes,
but they could opt not to.
This is at the proposal stage.
Yeah, that's the letter just came out last week, so I have no idea what the other agencies are thinking or.
But the whole project wouldn't crash because one or two stakeholders didn't want to fund the consultant. That is something that'll be negotiated later.
I believe so.
Thank you.
I had a question. Do we know the duration of the facilitation?
I'm going to go to the letter to see if.
And then I would also ask how many community meetings are being planned for Tiburon specifically?
I think they envision about a 6-month process, but they have not indicated any details as to number of meetings or location of meetings or how those meetings would. That's certainly, I think, part of the feedback they're probably seeking.
So when I read through the letter, I didn't see whether or not they would want 1 or 2 representatives from each of the agencies or governing bodies that they reached out to. Would there be, do you know whether there would need to be representation from the town of Tiburon
Yes.
on or through this process? So maybe 1 or 2 people from Tiburon Town Council would be a part of the process.
I believe that's what they anticipate, having appointees from the stakeholder agencies on the task force. As to the number from each agency, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Caltrans letter that came out many, many months ago specified the numbers of people on the task force. So we might be able to look back on that. You know, I'd be interested in knowing what the plan is for the outreach, for the direct community outreach, and also, you know, how many meetings are in Tiburon. I think getting an answer to Isaac's question just to confirm. I know when Caltrans put out their task force, it was 2 people from Tiburon Town Council. And I know we have interest
Yeah,
for that.
I think, again, I don't want to speak for the county. You know, the letter says what it says, but I believe they anticipate. I don't believe they want to direct the process right off the bat right now as to what it's going to be. I think what they're doing right now is gathering input from the stakeholders, and I think what they would hope is that through the feedback that they would maybe propose something a little more specific, and then that group, you know, would decide the things that you just mentioned,
Right.
Councilmember Thier, number of meetings, where they would be, who the facilitator would be.
Okay, and then I have another question. Have they asked Caltrans to pay for this? And I'll make a comment because, you know, this is Caltrans's project. And I firmly believe that Caltrans should be doing their public outreach. They have an entire public outreach office. They have many PIOs, public information officers, that are paid to work on these projects. Usually what they do is they assign a public information officer to the project, and then their team, their public outreach team and staff runs the public outreach program. Now, that didn't happen, which is why as mayor, I held that public forum. But I want to be really clear again that I don't think Tiburon should take over the public outreach process. And I really am hopeful that the county would ask Caltrans to pay for this. Maybe they have. And now they're coming to us because Caltrans said no, but I don't know if you have that answer, Greg.
I don't have that answer.
I would love to know that answer. Because I do think Caltrans should be paying for it. Now, that doesn't mean that if Caltrans says no, that I would not want to have a process. But those are my comments so far.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. You mentioned a possible role in this process for Transportation Authority of Marin, and what would they possibly do? Would they be involved in any of the engineering? Would they be involved in finding funding for those particular things that Caltrans feels they don't have to pay for? What is the role of TAM?
I don't know. All I can say is when I had a very brief conversation with the director of Public Works who authored this letter, and he mentioned that TAM would likely be receiving a copy of this letter as well.
So I can, if I want to know, I can follow up with their staff. Thank
So
you.
I feel like we're taking your deposition, Greg, because I don't know. I haven't been informed.
I can't
don't know.
recall.
I can't recall.
So
Jump in, John.
the letter asks for 2 things. The letter asks for an indication of interest in participating in the process, and then the second thing the letter asks for is feedback. So does it make sense for us to put together a tally or a set of notes around feedback and or questions, and then also indicating interest as a part of an action item? Or do we put the action item as just indicating the interest, and then the feedback is something that we put together separately?
That's a good question. I mean, at a minimum, the council could take action indicating that if this is the council's wish, that they are interested in, being part of this process. That's a relatively easy
Yeah.
So
action.
go ahead.
I just want to make sure the feedback portion isn't lost in the process, and it's easy for it's not a person issue. It's just sometimes if the motion is just interest, I have my concern is that the feedback may just sort of get lost in translation or not included for whatever reason if it's not part of the record.
So once staff responds, let's, I think we should, that's a great question, and let's deal with that in the discussion part.
Okay.
After we're done with but what is the staff input on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, I think at a minimum, if council chooses, they can indicate an interest in being part of the process. I think the feedback that we give the county on this doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of a motion.
Right.
As long as council appears to have consensus, we can winnow it down and try to get that to the county. It is a little bit of a vague, not vague, but not clear, completely clear ask. Feedback is in the eye of the beholder. So
I think also a budget would be helpful because $150,000 for 6 months of outreach that's pretty expensive, I think. And it would be good to see how that money will be spent. Are they including county staff time in that figure? What is the budget?
So that could be under the guise of feedback, right?
That's feedback.
Right.
Questions,
Feedback /
feedback.
questions. Yeah.
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 So I think as long as we can take all the questions back and get some answers, that would be good.
Okay, so, and more questions?
Yeah, but all we're being asked to do is confirm interest in participating. We're not committing to participating at this point. That's the gist of it as I understand it.
Well, it was a money ask, right? They're asking for money from
Not
us.
eventually they will be. Tonight, they're not asking for the council to
Right.
allocate any funding or indicate a
Right.
level of support financially. It just please indicate your interest or provide feedback by February 25th.
Right.
Again, pretty vague, but
I mean, they're kind of, I think also because they're stepping in as a convener in an area that Caltrans is really responsible for, they're kind of putting out feelers to everybody to say, is this a process you want to do?
Right, exactly. So I think, do we need a motion?
We're
or
not
can
there
we just-
yet. Right now we're asking questions of staff, and then we're going to go to public comment, and then we're going to have discussion.
Perfect.
Yeah, one more question. Do we anticipate that that there is a time when the traffic study may be available for review by town council
yes. The parametrics, the consultant who's doing the traffic study, is scheduled to present to the council, and I'm trying to remember if it's the first meeting in March or the second.
Yeah, I can't remember which, but yeah, we have one. I
One
think
is
it's
the
first
parks
one. I
update
think it's the
and one is
first
the
one, and then the
traffic.
parks is the second one, but I could be wrong.
I think traffic is the first one, so it'd be March 4th, I believe.
Okay.
And certainly it will be available prior to the meeting to review. And that'll be a comprehensive presentation on the traffic study, and it's more or less close to final form.
And then follow-up question for the traffic study, would we be provided the full presentation ahead of time, or would it be just a staff report?
I believe it'll be the full presentation.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, that's great news.
Okay, more questions?
Yeah.
No? Okay, so why don't we ask folks in the room and online if they have any comments about the county's proposed approach? No?
I have one member of the public online. I will recognize Sana Thomas.
Hi, good evening. I hope you can hear me. Yes?
Yes. Hi, Sana.
Hi, good to see you all. I just have one question, and I've been informed that it's too late to request that Caltrans use low carbon concrete for any parts of the repaving project that will require concrete. But I would like to ask the town to request bidders for future re- requests for repaving for Tiburon roads and sidewalks to use low carbon concrete, and which is totally totally aligned with the CAP's energy efficiency strategy C4 regarding low with the adoption of low embodied concrete standards similar to those adopted by the county. So I hope that this can be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and we can chat shortly with Grace about whether or not it makes sense to be more explicit about that. All right, any other comments about the county's proposal for convening to discuss phase 2 of Caltrans plan for Tiburon Boulevard?
Seeing none.
Okay, all right. So let's get back to our discussion. I think Isaac, you sort of captured it very well. So the first question is the town expressing interest in the process being proposed by the county? I think, based on what I've heard, the consensus is to say, yes, we are interested in such a process. The devil's in the details, and we are going to have feedback about it. The second question is, what is our feedback? And, there are, I think, two ways we can go about this, and we can do both, or pick one. If we have specific feedback that we have consensus on as we sit here, we can identify those items and ask the town manager to go back with those questions or comments. So we can do it directly as a council. The second, which I don't know that we've discussed before, is since this is a proposal for a process that's going to last a while and have lots of iterations and have public feedback and all kinds of things like that, whether or not it makes sense for us to create some kind of ad hoc committee or assign a council member to follow this and interact with the county as this goes forward. And I'm asking that as an open-ended question. I have no preconceived
just
outcome to that.
Comment on that. We already have a traffic study ad hoc that could broaden into this particular project, because certainly the data they've collected impacts how the decisions are made on the particular Caltrans project we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could. I guess I think they're kind of different items in that the traffic study is focused primarily on congestion and what we can do about it, and kind of very specific project-oriented activity. The Caltrans, I'm not really sure what the phase 2 will be, other than dealing with the biking issue. Is there some other?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to have the feedback that we all agree on, which is, we all agreed to express interest. And then I think all the questions that were asked tonight by everyone are good questions that I would ask that staff ask. But I don't think we need an ad hoc committee, because then there's going to be another committee, and it just seems like a lot of committees. And
Yeah.
our town manager is the one working with the county, so that would double up on what he's doing.
That's
I
fine
think-
with me. So why don't we identify what those questions are? I don't know if you guys have a record of them, or if you want us to kind of quickly go through the questions again and list them.
He's being recorded, so we know.
Well, I understand, but I think we should identify what we're asking. So I think the first question was, the clearest question was the budget question, asking, have they asked Caltrans to fund this? And also, is everyone being asked to fund equally? And also, the third part of that is Councilmember Thier's request for a budget what is the 150,000 for, right? So we have very nuts and bolts questions in that regard. I think council member Nick Farr asked, what is the proposed representation on this group? In terms of, are we talking about a certain number from each entity or more from one entity than another? Basically, what will this body be composed of? So those are kind of the ones I remember.
Yeah, there were more,
Okay.
but I think if you could just take them off the recording, that would be good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, those are comments from individual council members. I think we're trying to identify feedback from the council, so I'm trying to identify what the specific questions were that we'd like to send back as opposed to go back through the
Well,
video.
I don't think anyone disagrees with all the questions that were asked, so that would be the council, right? I mean, I don't think anyone here doesn't want to know how many meetings would be in Tiburon, what the outreach plan is.
Yeah.
So I think really that
I think-
staff should go back through the questions we've already asked and ask those questions.
I think understanding the process is important, and I think
Yeah.
Councilmember Thier brought up some good points there that I would also like to know. I also wonder if maybe they're kind of step 2, where if the question is, have you gone to Caltrans and the answer is no, then I guess the question is, are you going to go to Caltrans?
Exactly.
And then
Would you
if-
please go to Caltrans?
Yeah, would you please
Please
go to
go.
Caltrans? And if the answer is no, right, then that's a different set of questions. If the answer is yes, we plan on going to Caltrans and hopefully we don't come to you and ask for any money, that's a different sort of decision tree of questions. And then the other direction, which is yes, we've gone to Caltrans and Caltrans said no, right? Then that's, let's talk process and
Well,
those sorts of things. So if
Yeah.
it feels like more questions come up from that, and I wonder if there's a way for us to, I think, maybe capture what Councilmember Thier is asking, with kind of a, if they say this, can we ask them this instead and get more information than sort of just have you right? Because what couldn't come back to us is, have you talked to Caltrans?
No.
And just yes, and then it's
Well, could we have a representative from the county? Could we have a representative from the county come and talk to the council?
I could certainly request that. Yep.
So I just want to add one thing onto what Isaac was saying. I would empower staff to ask the
Right.
follow-up questions. And I think that this is going to come back before us as a full council because we will be asked to give money,
Yeah.
assuming Caltrans does not say yes, they will fund this. So I think we'll have another opportunity to discuss it, but I think the staff would ask follow-up questions, like they always do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what it sounds like is we will, once staff has had an opportunity to speak with the county and get answers to the questions, we'll re-agendize this for further feedback upon hearing answers to the questions. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yep. I mean, and just so I'm clear, it sounds, and understandably so, it sounds like, more details are needed before council can really.
Right. I think the overall feedback is we need more detail.
Right.
And then there are all these questions.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Okay.
I
So,
think
yeah.
in terms of interest, I think the interest is
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then before we allocate actual dollars to something like this or people or resources, we need more information.
Right.
And this actually doesn't ask us to commit to budgetary allocations at this time.
No, it does
It's
not.
just, we're asking them to give us the information that you're asking for.
Yeah. But see, once we say we're interested, then they're going to ask us for the money.
True.
It does say county staff would welcome the opportunity to discuss the proposal further, including our agency's potential role.
Yeah. So that
So,
might be a good idea to bring them.
It is a
back.
nice invitation from the county.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, does staff have enough to go on at this point?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a need to take an action in terms of voting.
No, I
If
think
there's not,
you've
then,
heard from the council.
Yeah, I think I have enough to go on and,
Do we need to vote on interest?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
unless town council directs us otherwise. All right, great. Thank you all for that. Now, I have to open my agenda. We move to my favorite part of the meeting, where we invite Grace to give us an update on the town's sustainability program. So, oop. Oh, you're gonna,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm gonna click through. Good evening.
All right, so I just want to highlight before we begin that so sustainability has been an issue that Tiburon has been at the forefront of now for decades. It's something that our residents care passionately about. It's one of the 3 items on my list this year of things I want to make tangible progress on. We have an outstanding climate action plan. We have a sustainability element in our general plan, and I asked Grace to provide us a report. This is not the annual report per se. It's just an opportunity for the council to have a discussion about how we're doing, whether or not Grace has ideas about other things we could consider doing, what she's seeing other communities do, and how much progress we're making against our goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Grace.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thanks for having me tonight. One quick side note here about the Caltrans stuff. Caltrans is actually using lower carbon cement products in their paving projects now. It's not the same standard as the county, but they're essentially using more limestone centered cement mixes, which reduces the amount of clinker, which is a funny name for the high carbon intensity product that's needed. So they are making progress in their own projects. Same with other big paving agencies in the Bay, like BART. They're also trying to do more. So we can support them in that.
So it's in the direction of what Sana was requesting.
It's
not
part of
being
their work
completely linked.
progress. Yeah, a couple years ago, they've kind of started integrating that into their projects a bit more. Don't know about the specifics of this project, but I know that they're implementing that in all applicable projects. So,
Great, thank you.
so anyway, back on track. This is the climate sustainability update, per what Mayor Wellner said. Just jumping into an overview of our goal progress. So our goal for our CAP is by 2030 to reduce emissions, our community-based emissions, 50% below 1990 levels. This is similar to other jurisdictions in the county. Ours is actually a little higher than some others. As of 2023, we are at 24% below 1990 levels. I know that 2023 is now many years away. This is our most recent data. We have to work through PG&E and also through the Marin Energy Watch partnership to get our most recent emissions data. And sometimes that can be a little bureaucratic in terms of getting data from PG&E, but we are looking to get 2024 data, 2025 data as soon as possible. So when we have that data, I will bring it to council to update everyone. What I'm going to do for this presentation is I'm going to just highlight sort of big elements of our CAP and then go into some project specifics. And then we can have more of a discussion, question-based session once I get through these slides. If I say anything or use any vernacular that's unclear, please feel free to stop me or ask questions if it's relevant to the slide. So focusing on community engagement, I say we, meaning Tiburon and Mill Valley, are the only jurisdiction with an independent sustainability newsletter. We have over 400 subscribers and it's released monthly. I try to release it on the first day of the month, if not the first Monday of the month, if it's a weekend.
Any thoughts about how many are Tiburon and how many are Mill Valley?
I've tried
not to be in competition with our.
And I tried to figure that out, but also we have a lot of subscribers who are from around the county.
Oh, okay, not just within. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think it's a pretty even split. I say it's a third each way. So third Mill Valley, third Tiburon, and then third other jurisdictions. And yeah, the content, if you're subscribed to it, you'll see it includes a lot of local issues, topics, as well as free resources and webinars. Nothing I include includes, a paywall or some sort of a registration fee if it's an event, just to keep it equitable. Also, we have virtual open hours every Tuesday from 9 to 11, approximately 2 attendees each session. And a lot of time they ask questions about how things are going, or they have specific questions, a lot like maybe waste related, where should things go, how does this policy work, etc. Very positive conversations. Countywide messaging. So I developed a subcommittee through Marin Climate Energy Partnership, or MCEP, a little while ago, maybe a year ago. And so we work on the development of monthly materials that are related to an event coming up that's like a big event. For example, we have like big Earth Day events, or we have Ride to Bike to Anywhere Day, or seasonality. For example, in the wintertime, we talk about rain. Perhaps Marin Water has rebates on rain barrels, or saving energy, how to save energy when it's cold out, keeping your thermostat low. This material is developed so that there is consistency through the county. So each jurisdiction will publish the same sort of blurb in their respective newsletters. And so that way, ideally, everyone in the county is getting the same messaging information. We also work a lot with resilient neighborhoods. So they are doing their ongoing work focused on individual household climate action planning. If you haven't taken their workshops, I highly encourage you to do so. They just finished their winter session. Their spring sessions are usually around March or April. If you're interested, it'll be in my newsletter. And they have a new executive director now, as of a little less than a year ago. And they've been putting more work into providing resources in Spanish and for renters, which we've really appreciated. So that was some sort of direction we gave through our jurisdictions. We'd like to see more information about, so they've been working hard at that. Waste management. So we have our reusable foodware ordinance. We have no reported violations of any commercial or residential addresses. Sorry, just commercial for this. No reported violations in Tiburon. However, educational efforts are underway. As a reminder, this is being enforced by the county, so this is being enforced by EHS, and there's some conversations underway of how EHS can get more staff to support that effort for enforcement. Since Zero Waste Marin is often contacted for it, but they're not actually the ones enforcing it. SB 1383 compliance. So this applies to residential and commercial addresses. We submitted our big implementation record. So this is done once every 4 years to CowerCycle last year, along with the site visit. So there's 2 folks from CowerCycle came down. They followed one of the MVRS trucks around to see what they were picking up, what their routes look like. And then I met with them to discuss their findings and go through our implementation record. This is the big thing where we get a report back from CowerCycle, the state, on if they had any issues with our implementation. We were one of the first jurisdictions in the state to do this. Same with Marin County in general. We're kind of their guinea pig for implementation. Which the context being, we have really strong waste management programs. So us being one of the strongest in the country, they're trying to use us as the test subject to see how this implementation is going. We are still waiting to get that final report back, though. And we still are required to do our annual reporting, which is a little bit of a lighter lift, and we do that a lot with Zero Waste Marin support. And in permitting, we are in the process of updating our event permitting language so that there is no question about compliance in those events. So special event permitting with food, making sure that those requirements are understood by vendors, right? So making sure that those 3 waste streams are there. When we talk about reusable foodware ordinance, we don't want to see plastic, forbid styrofoam at our town sponsored events or, town permitted events. So we're working to have that language integrated into our permitting. So for green building, this was recent. So in December, we adopted our ordinance, which not only adopted the 2025 code in full, but we also readopted our local REACH codes to apply to the 2025 code cycle. So that includes Tier 1 without energy efficiency measures. That includes our residential remodel flex path applying to 500 square feet or more. That includes our heightened EV requirements, meaning if there is a residential project where a service panel is being upgraded, they're now required to install EV charging. And no, that's everything. And it's currently being reviewed by the state agencies, so that being the California Building Standards Commission and the California Energy Commission for final approval. This process is going to take longer than it usually does because of AB 130. They told me 90 days at least. They are not going to be any more specific about that, unfortunately. And I'm almost expecting it to go longer because they had a high influx of applications due to the 2025 code cycle. So I will keep you all updated on that. But as a reminder, AB 130 is the state law that restricts local jurisdictions to make amendments to the code that affect residential units. That was in response to the LA fires trying to promote housing. So any language that talks about additional requirements for residential, it's going to be under review for AB 130. So worst case scenario, we would get partial approval for our reach codes, and they would essentially not allow us to do anything related to our residential. But we could still do anything for non-residential, which is a little confusing. So I will keep you updated if we hear anything. Our application was very strong. We had a lot of findings supporting the exceptions that we wanted to apply. But yeah, it's a weird process. It's still pretty new for both of these state agencies.
So it's interesting because what you're saying is that, uh, the reach codes are available for towns to adopt, but
Mhm.
if you then adopt them, they might not be approved.
Yeah, and that's because of AB 130. That wasn't the case before.
Before, but now it
And
is.
that's only for residential units. So, and it's also funny because it's really talking about fuel allowances. Um, but when we talk about reach codes that aren't fuel related, concrete, for example, it's really vague on what the state is going to do with those because the law wasn't written about non-fuel reach codes. It was really just written for like energy reach codes. So it's a gray area. I've talked a lot with both of those agency staff. Um, they're building the plane while they're flying it. That's what it seems like over there. Um, but I will, point out that it's important for us to do these things because you'll see at this table, this is from our 2023 data. Natural gas emissions aren't really changing.
I was just going to comment. This isn't the
Not
nice
going
slope
down.
that we like to see,
It's
right?
not the slope we want to see. And, unfortunately, this is a trend throughout the county. We're not the only jurisdictions whose data looks like this. This is pretty normal. So it's something that we really need to work on, whether that's through adopted policy or, community engagement, lifestyle changes, et cetera.
Is this data Tiburon specific?
Correct. Yes, this is Tiburon
Oh,
specific data. So yeah, the bottom, um, the x-axis is going to indicate the year, and then the y is going to indicate therms. That red line is, and I'm reading this because it's a little hard to see on there for folks. That red line is the emissions from natural gas. So that red line really shows the trend, and it's not changed much since 2005.
So let me ask a question where either you may have already looked at this, in which case that would be great to hear what you're saying, or if not, this is in the nature of kind of directing you to look at it. But I understand that there are two sets of new standards that have been adopted by other agencies that will affect Tiburon that might have the effect of pushing that down,
Correct.
right? So one is the Bay Area Air District. And then the other is the Energy Commission. So are you going to be talking about those? Because those are coming up in
Soon.
future years,
Yeah.
right?
And I was going to focus mainly on the Air District because the Energy Commission ones are still a few years out, but the Air District regulations are going to be 2027. So, and for everyone listening in or for here today, starting in 2027, the Air District is going to apply what is called like the zero NOx ruling. So it's going to start in 2027, but continue to roll out. But 2027 is going to be the trigger date for any new hot water heater. You cannot buy it gas powered. It will have to be a heat pump water heater, which is a big conversation happening right now in the Bay Area and specifically in Marin, what that looks like. And what financial resources will be available for those who may need it, what rollout will look like, and also how to prevent folks from maybe sidestepping those regulations by maybe going out of state to buy appliances. But it'll be interesting. That will be a big push. And heat pump water heaters are a big part of our reach codes. You'll see like our residential remodel flex path. That particular measure, so to speak, installing heat pump water heater has a huge point score. That would be essentially all you need to do for that project.
But
to
then,
meet
but then in 2027, it'll move from our incentive-based system to just a rule.
a rule.
And
Exactly.
that could have an impact on
Yeah.
what we see there.
So it's kind of a twofold. Our reach code ideally will be accepted by the state and it'll be alignment with this other bigger
Yeah.
ruling. So we'll kind of be on track. So that way we're supporting it. But for some reason our reach code does not get approved by the state, there's this other ruling that will still take effect. So we're trying to put as many eggs in as many baskets as possible with this because it's a huge issue in terms of emissions.
I had a question. 2014, do we know why it went down?
I used to know why it went down. I don't remember.
But you
I
can tell me when
No,
you
that's
remember.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it had to do something with how the data was calculated. It was kind of an odd year. I will bug Christine about it because she knows the specifics. But yeah, it's that one's a little funky. All right. Any other questions about green building or natural gas use before we move on? Okay, great. Electric vehicles, the other big.
I just
Yeah.
had a question about green building. Is there any data, and maybe this is offline, but I'm really curious about the impact of LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Title 24 has impact commercially. Is there any information around the impact of that shift to LED on, I guess on this data?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The LED light switch would be more of effect. So our cap breaks this down in terms of, energy efficiency and then, electrification. So this green building measure, it kind of mushes them both, but it specifically is talking more about electrification. So what you're talking about is more energy efficiency, which is confusing. So energy efficiency being we're taking something that already uses electricity, but we're trying to make it less intensive. So it would affect a different table that I can show to council offline. But yes, there is information out there about how that's changed. MGSA has done a lot of work on managing, our street lights, which have been transferred over to LEDs for, I don't know if Greg knows how long that's been, but a long time. And I think, yeah, there's definitely language in Title 24, not only just the mandatory code, but in Tier 1 about additional requirements for LEDs because it is impactful in terms of energy.
Okay. Is there another section that would cover that, or is
Yeah,
that?
it not in my slides, unfortunately, mainly because energy efficiency is actually, it's going pretty well, mainly because there's a lot of easy switches like LEDs. So I didn't highlight that in my slides today, but again, it's in our most recent GHG emissions report, which is for everyone listening in, it is on our town website. And if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share that with you and go into specifics more.
Thank you.
Greg, did you want to say anything? No? Okay. Moved his mic. Okay, EVs and transit. Electric vehicle planning. So Marin Climate Energy Partnership, MCEP, we're currently working with NV5, which is a contractor, and they do a lot of EV planning throughout the state. We're kind of working with them through some funding through MCEP on options for EV charger installation and management throughout the county. And we're trying to figure out what an RFP would look like to either be released countywide or to be released individually. Really, what we want is a vendor who will do installation and management of EV public charging. Mainly because it is a lift for jurisdictional staff to be the managers of EV charging. It just takes a lot of time. And also, it doesn't really make sense operationally for us to be the ones managing the O&M, so to speak, of EV charging infrastructure. So we're trying to see if there's a vendor out there who either within each individual jurisdiction or countywide would be willing to create a management plan and implementation plan for more EV charging. What would O&M look like? And also, would they be willing to take on the O&M of existing infrastructure that we have? So
This is public infrastructure?
public infrastructure, correct. So Tiburon doesn't have any town-owned public EV chargers, so this is an important topic for us because it'll kind of lay out how we move forward with this. Either way, I'm leaning toward that this will be this RFP will be developed kind of as a draft language and will likely be released individually. And I'm really excited about this since this has been a big conversation over the last year of how do we manage our EV charging infrastructure throughout the county? You're seeing a lot of downtimes of chargers, and that's because of O&M operational constraints between working with the vendors that are owning the chargers, who's also doing the operation and maintenance. The cost of that is quite high, and so there's just a lot of issues there. And largely, jurisdictions aren't really seeing the bang for the buck that they were promised.
Uh, I would just toss in something.
Yeah.
This is one of my most formative experiences as a council member. I think at the very first meeting I ever attended in 2018 as a council member, there was a discussion about EV charging. And it was one of these kind of education in government conversations because in discussing where to put EVs in town, the conversation was really focused on where the town owned property and where it might be convenient to put them, as opposed to what people needed and what the market needed and where they should be and whether they'd be used, that kind of thing. And so I'm just in going through this process, I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but I would just emphasize that whenever we're looking at the town taking action as opposed to say requiring multifamily units to take action or whatever, when the town is actually doing it, that we also keep kind of some type of market focus on will they be used, where would they be best used, um, will this really contribute, as opposed to where we just own property where we could stick it kind of thing, right?
For sure. And that's one of the benefits of this approach is because we're having it be market focused.
Right.
When we have a vendor that we're saying you're going to be the owner and operator of these chargers, they're thinking, okay, we want to put it where it's going to get used. So they're going to ideally an RFP will specify this, but show us options of what that looks like. And then we'll have that back and forth. There'll also be, and then the flip side of that, there'll also be language about equity, right? If we only focus on the market side of things, it's great, but we might leave some people out of that conversation. So putting some language in there as well as, adjacency to multifamily units who don't necessarily have that EV charging infrastructure yet. So the spot on.
So get it? Yeah.
Well, I think you had a question.
There was one thing I wanted to add. So I know that some jurisdictions have contracted with vendors who have then gone out of business.
Yes.
And then there's no one to maintain those facilities.
That's also a
So
concern.
in the RFP, if, maybe someone could come up with something to, guarantee that they will, maintain the systems that they put in, because that's a huge problem for some jurisdictions.
Yeah,
They have EV charging stations that aren't working and they don't know how to maintain them.
Yeah.
Are you covering alternative commuting right now, or
Yeah. I that was gonna be my next point. But if you want to jump ahead of me, you're more than welcome to.
I love jumping ahead. I was just wondering how a draft trip reduction ordinance would really help when the transit agencies we have are experiencing such problems with the drop off in commuting that they're worried about how they're going to maintain services at all. So does this policy need to be reformulated in some way?
That's a great question. And, we just started having these conversations less than 3 months ago. And so Tam is involved in these conversations. And actually, they are quite honestly, they're pushing for us to do it. I think it's kind of a chicken and egg where what you said, but also from what Tam has said too, when we have these policies in place, it further supports their efforts to kind of make ridership go up, and then these other things will fall into place. Really, what we're seeing though is there's a lot of, for big businesses, the air district has requirements on commuting, whether that be offering alternative forms of commuting, some sort of benefit like remote work. But that applies to businesses that have 500 employees or more. That doesn't really apply here very much, except for maybe a few places in San Rafael. So what we're trying to figure out is how can we work not only just within the town having a policy and then, maybe having it sit there on a shelf, but working with businesses, working with schools, working with these other, groups and agencies on pushing this material forward, saying there are other options, there's these resources. How do we get it to people that need it most? But also, there's of course this huge behavior change that needs to happen in terms of using transit. A lot of people have and that's kind of our other conversation within TAM and our, we call it like our alt commute subcommittee. Um, how do we get people to view transit differently? How can we, show folks that it's efficient. There's these other benefits of, you don't have to be sitting in traffic driving. You could be working, you could be reading a book, you could be doing nothing at all, and you could still move somewhere without, sitting in your car.
But that only addresses people who are already
Right.
using transit.
Yeah, and we're also trying to figure out new user groups. So specifically, we're trying to figure out the smart corridor. So we have that smart transit. Who's using that already? And then how can we get them to use transit continuing to Southern Marin? But Southern Marin is a hard one for transit users. We're seeing a cutback in routes through TAM. We don't have the train system go that far. Our Redwood Bike Share program that's getting funded through TAM doesn't come down this far. So it's really locally, it's an issue of trying to get these, alternative commuting forms into Southern Marin specifically. And so that's been a big part of our conversation as well.
Have there been any public transit systems that have worked in other jurisdictions outside of Marin County that have been really effective?
Yes, and our case studies are is actually kind of it's funny. It's college campuses. You look at college campuses and how they operate with their bus systems and their bike paths and their et cetera. They work quite well. And then you also think about BART too. BART has been really transformative in how people commute Trans Bay. And we've also, countywide, I don't want to say given up because that's kind of strong, but we aren't looking at trying to fix the East Bay to Marin commuting. I think there's really no option for that to be a long-term solution right now because there's no long-term options, like a ferry system that goes directly to or BART. But it is a question we have a lot of the time of thinking about what other transit systems exist not only within the county or the bay, but within the country or other countries that we could kind of take lessons from. And so we've kind of tasked TAM with looking at that further as well.
So, maybe I want to double click on what the last thing you had just mentioned, which is that we're not looking at solving the East Bay commute issues. Um, is that because they're going to go away, or is that because they're too hard? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and I'm an East Bay commuter myself, for those of you who are interested. So I feel very passionate about that issue. I would love for it to be solved, and I'm all for advocating for it. But it kind of came down to the countywide discussion of there are too many systematic issues at play for us to figure this out. There's too many agencies that would have to be involved. It's a multi-million dollar fix. It should have been fixed many years ago when this infrastructure was being put in place, but now we're trying to undo things that have already been done.
So the consensus is sort of like that old phrase, too big to fail, it's too big to fix.
Yeah.
That's the consensus
That's
by our countywide leadership?
Yeah, that's kind of the consensus through TAM and other conversations right now. I'm not to say that this is getting pushed off the table completely as a conversation. We still think about ways that we can support our East Bay commuters, whether that be through like we have our bus system that's the I forget what bus that is, but it goes, across the Richmond Bridge. We have bus stations near Larkspur Ferry that is a, point of interconnection. We have the Larkspur Ferry, we have the smart train that goes north. But again, the real, local issue is going to be connecting those kind of hotspots to Southern Marin. Because those transfers are harder. You talk about, okay, I'm on the smart train, I get off at San Rafael and then I take a bus and then likely another bus, or I have to walk and then bike. And it's just really complicated and that time adds up. And for people who need to get to pick up their kid at school, who need to go to work a job. It's just not feasible. And so cars are really the only option. And so that's what we're trying to figure out.
So were you involved at all in the mascots project that tried to consolidate the various transit providers?
I wasn't necessarily like involved in that, but I was, updated as that progress went on. Yeah.
So it's my sense that the best public transportation systems work when they have a consolidated
Yep.
source of funding.
Correct.
Is that something that is on the rate? I see from your face, you don't have to say a word.
No, yeah, and at that point, that's a bigger problem than, one, I would be able to solve for sure. But it is something that we, as, city staff, respectively, sustainability staff, we are talking with TAM and other agencies about that because it's a huge part of our cap. And we feel almost a little helpless in terms of actual implementation because there are so many, these big agencies that have to kind of narrow in on things. And so what we're really trying to do is figure out, okay, what can we do locally that would, not only support these efforts that are going underway, but what direction can we give the transit agencies
Yeah.
from our perspective of what we need from them? So those conversations are becoming a bit more transparent, and honestly, they've been quite productive. So hopefully, I'll have a bigger update for you at the next council meeting or next climate update. But for right now, baby steps. Right. Any other questions on either of these topics? Okay, great. I'm going to get into, oh, my bad. I'm going to get into more project specific items. And then we can have a broader conversation. So, sea level rise planning. I brought this to you all recently, but we have officially kicked off this project. We finalized all of our documents with OPC, the funding agency. And as a reminder, we are partnered with our consultant, which is Moffett and Nickel, along with our subs such as CMG, SFEI, O'Rourke and Associates, which is Christine, doing outreach. We had our kickoff meeting a little less than 2 weeks ago, just to figure out what next steps are in terms, especially working with BCDC, which is the governing agency for this plan. So just looking, near term, our first steps in task one is, coordination with the agencies. So working with BCDC on what they need from us in these first steps. Particularly, we need to have an intent to start a sub-regional shoreline adaptation plan, or RSAP. And part of that intent would include the development of our community engagement plan and project management plan. And then also doing some other administrative things where we can kind of set us up for success with outreach. So updating our website, making maybe an independent newsletter sign on, getting messaging out there and making sure that all of our team is aware of what's going on. And then looking ahead, kind of our main big deliverable in the next steps is a white page that will compile the existing studies and data related to sea level rise in the town of Tiburon. Exploring creative community outreach. We are seeing through other local projects that meeting people where they're at is huge. We often will talk about sea level rise on these kind of bigger scales of whole streets flooding or, long-term impacts. But people are really worried, what about my house in particular? What about this path that I walk on all the time? So, being prepared to have those conversations and meeting people where they're at is going to be huge. And then also the draft of our vulnerability assessment will be kind of the first big deliverable of the project. So we're mainly developing this vulnerability assessment and then subsequently adaptation plan. Any questions on this?
Yes. Will the vulnerability assessment include how many feet of sea level rise that we're going to need to plan for, or has that already been determined?
It's been determined. I can't, sorry, I apologize. I can't tell you the exact numbers off my head, but it's based off of a statewide uh policy of what we need to plan for. So I think it's some like there's like short-term, midterm, and long-term situations that we're going to plan for. Something like 25, like up to 2,100 and some sort of amount of feet, but it's based off of the statewide sea level rise standards.
Not 2,100 feet.
No, sorry, the year 2100.
Okay,
Planning ahead for the
okay.
year
Yeah,
2100.
and of
Apologize.
course,
My gosh.
BCDC, the
Yeah.
Bay Conservation and Development Commission, has taken very detailed looks at all the different scenarios that
Yeah.
are coming our way.
Yeah, their guidelines are very specific on what we need to do with this plan.
And so actually the county, right, did a Bay Wave assessment. It was less formal, but now they're in a process where they meet every 2 or 3 months about consolidating sea level rise planning among the jurisdictions. So one doesn't build a wall that sends
Yeah.
the water to the next jurisdiction. Are we part of that?
Yeah, the Bay Wave meetings, yes. And then also that Bay Wave study you mentioned is going to be part of this sort of first memo, which will compile that existing data, along with the TAM study that was done recently, which includes
Yes.
some good GIS layers about groundwater rise as well, which the Bay Wave study didn't have. But yeah, the county is trying to put together a governing structure for sea level rise in particular. It's been delayed a little bit. They're trying to hire a new executive director position actually in the county. It was released before the holidays and they didn't find anyone, so they just re-released that position a few weeks ago. But all to say, they're trying to pull some sort of structure together to help guide everyone in the same process and make sure that we're all aware of what's going on in.
Yeah, that's good because one of the first introduction meetings, they talked about how San Francisco and big jurisdictions are better organized and will be in the front of the line for those grants.
Yeah.
But you're not there yet.
No.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, it's funny, and I also think that the game has changed a little bit too, right? We think about Sausalito, they just finished a big sea level rise study, but it didn't follow these guidelines. And so now they're in conversation because it came out after. So now they're in conversations about how do they fill the gaps between what they've done and what these new guidelines say. So, I think everyone's trying to figure this out as well, including BCDC, which is up to our benefit, right? So they really want to work with us to make sure that we are doing the right things, that we're meeting these standards. But yeah, it is kind of a funny process right now in terms of making sure everyone's on the same page. Right. Any other questions about sea level rise? No? Great. Resiliency at city facilities. So we have two kind of big projects going on right now. We'll start with this town hall and library energy roadmap. We recently partnered with Bay Ren and they assessed the town hall and library for energy and resilience upgrades to reduce emissions and save energy costs. And they provided staff with a really extensive list of actionable recommendations to create a community resilience center between the sites. So this would look like kind of like a microgrid between the library and town hall, energy efficiency upgrades, electrification upgrades, funding, potential funding costs that this would take. It was a really comprehensive study. I don't know, Greg, if you want to speak any more to this since.
And before you do, I just want to chime in and say it's actually not all that obvious to an outside person how resilience and energy efficiency necessarily go together, right? Because those are kind of two separate concepts. So you might want to.
Yeah, I don't have that much more to add. I've given council periodic updates in writing on this. As Grace said, we recently were presented the Bay Ren report, and you'll be hearing more about this as we talk about the budget for next year. Working cooperatively with Crystal over at the library. It's a really exciting project. You're right, though. It is interesting, the intersection of.
I mean, resilience.
Yeah.
Is kind of one thing, and then, but I'm curious how that is related to energy efficiency or efficiency.
Part of the energy efficiency part was the requirements of the grant process. So we received a technical assistance grant from Bay Ren to go through this process. And it really had two components. One was to look at the existing facilities from an energy efficiency perspective.
Okay, so that was just straight up.
Right, and then the second part was community resilience, and we really pushed, meaning Crystal and myself, really pushed Bay Ren to focus on the community resilience part, because from an energy efficiency perspective, it's not that it's simple, but we both felt like we have a pretty good handle on what we've done and what still remains to be done from a facility perspective on efficiency. And they confirmed that in their report, basically, still some lighting upgrades, in a few things at the library and here as well. But from the resilience perspective, we really asked them to focus on that and this whole idea of tying the facilities together in a microgrid with a large battery storage device, which would be a community resource in the event of a long-term power outage,
Okay,
essentially.
so that's how they're
Yeah.
Yeah,
tied.
so-
Okay.
Yeah. To sum it up, this sort of the energy efficiency and electrification upgrades are important because we can build a microgrid, and then that microgrid could sustain in the event of a power outage due to a natural disaster event or some other event where community members could seek refuge, which is not only important just have a safe place, but could access and charge their cell phones, their electric vehicles, have refrigeration for medications that they need, or breast milk if they have a child. So that's kind of like the resiliency, tying that energy to resiliency pipeline. The other project we have going on is, we were recently awarded a grant through MCE. So we were the only, to toot the town's own horn. MCE did a grant process for all of the counties it serves, and they chose one application for each county. So Tiburon was the only one in Marin County who got this
Nice.
money to install a battery energy storage system, or BESS, at a facility. So for us, that's going to be our police station. We looked at this for the town hall, but due to this other existing planning effort we were doing, we decided to do the police station. Another requirement was that the facility had to have existing solar, which the police station does. So we were awarded a grant, which originally came through the DOE. So the DOE gave Marin Clean Energy money, and now Marin Clean Energy is giving us that money. So it's kind of confusing, but it is all in all from the Department of Energy. And we are required to install this battery by the end of 2026. We are currently in our reviewing proposal process. We had some strong proposals, and we are required by the DOE to make a selection by the end of this month, so within the next week and a half, to move forward with this project, because it is a tight timeline as well. But we are looking at around a 600 kilowatt hour battery at the police station to support the existing solar. And then, of course, in the event of an outage, not only would that be a potential community resource, but also our emergency operations center, which is within the town police station.
And for those of us that don't know, how long does a 600 kilowatt battery let the police station operate without power?
A long time. For example, maybe a 300-ish kilowatt battery can last maybe 1 or 2 days, like just lights on, keeping the motor running. 600, you could last, 6 days.
Well, and with solar
the
recharging
solar,
it, then
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and the police station also has a backup generator. So,
Right, we have a
if you got to the point where it went days and days and days and days, we do have the capability of charging the battery. The whole system will be interconnected. And one of the side benefits is, in theory, we may be able to be part of a peak demand program through the utilities, which will save us money and energy. The advantage of a solar storage battery system is you can peak shave essentially. You can use the energy from the battery during the highest peak cost times, and then charge it even from the grid at night when energy is cheaper. So it's a whole interconnected system that we're looking for, and when they operate correctly, they're pretty amazing systems. So we're really excited about this one.
Right. Any questions on these two projects or related items? Great. I think that's the end of what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions off of what I said, or any other questions that I didn't mention, off things I didn't mention.
I just have one question. It would be great to have this slide deck, because sometimes some of us are in meetings when we're asked what Tiburon is doing.
I'm happy to send this to you,
Thank you.
to the council.
I had a question. Is there anything that Tiburon is, and you can answer this later. I don't want to put you on the spot. It just came in my mind,
Yeah.
so don't feel like you have to answer it. Is there anything that Tiburon is not doing that you would recommend that we do in the future?
The things that we're not doing, and I'll say this in a pragmatic and vague way, What things we're not doing are things that we're having conversations about. I think the biggest thing looking forward is going to be this EV charging infrastructure. We have a huge number of EV users. And actually, I didn't really talk about this in the slides. I realized. Let me go back. You're going to see that our VMT, vehicle miles traveled, has not changed much since 2005, but we're still seeing this sloping decrease of transportation emissions. Why? Electric vehicles. People are driving electric vehicles, or on the other hand, more fuel efficient cars, but
Right.
mainly it's electric. So we have a huge user group. Marin County is the second highest electric vehicle adoption county in the state. I said that kind of funky, but after Santa Clara, we are the highest county with the most EVs. And so we have a huge amount of EVs, but with no public EV charging, that can be an issue. So I think that's something we're really looking ahead for, and we're already having conversations about. Other than that, all these other little things, we're just trying to fill gaps in. And we're at a funny point in our cap, right? Where we're about halfway through, a little over, and all of the big ticket, easy, quote unquote, easy items have been done.
Right. That's what's making me a little nervous. Which
Yeah,
is,
we're doing so now it's about these nominal increases of okay, what else can we do? What else can we stack? And so we're really taking a keen eye to the CAP implementation table and other things being done across the country. What can we learn from other jurisdictions? But also, we are very much leaders in this still. So we're trying to figure out things as we go along on how to make these emission impacts continue.
remind me again, our target year,
2030.
2030. So that is 4 years from now
Yeah. It's
to
coming
get
up.
another 25%.
Yeah.
increase.
To be fair, it's technically 7 years, based off of that data, but
Off of it because it's
if we're
2023.
playing safe, we definitely could say it's we're about halfway there, all in all, right? 25% at halfway mark.
But we started this well over a decade ago.
Yeah, this has been going on since I think 2005 was when emission tracking really started, and
Right. So in the first 20 years, we've gotten the 25%, and now we have 4 years to
do the rest.
get the rest.
Yep.
Um, all right. Well, I guess what I would challenge you to do in terms of the annual report is to um, not, this isn't anything that we would hold you to, but to do a thought exercise that you could share with us, showing how we could get there.
Okay.
So that we have some sense of whether or not it's possible or whether our target needs adjusting to be realistic. We want to be realistic about what we're doing. And so, but we also want to be very aggressive. So
Yeah.
we need to be able to believe that we're taking steps that will get us there.
Yeah. And I think, the biggest variable in all of this is individual behavior change. We stake a lot of our climate action work on, we have all these programs in place or we have these resources in place. Will people take action on them? Will people decide to electrify their home? Will people decide to use alternative modes of transit? And so that's kind of the big question right now as well, is how do we incentivize people further to make changes that they haven't already made?
I mean, what it would also be very interesting to know, and I don't know if we have the ability to get this data or if it falls in someone else's hands, but our point system for for housing to reward energy efficiency, how effective is that being in creating reductions?
Yeah, for
No.
the flex path stuff. I can talk about that with some other folks who've had the flex path implemented for longer, and see what they've
See if
they
okay.
have any
All right.
thoughts on that.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for that.
Um,
It was very informative. Do you have another question? Go ahead.
Yes, I have questions. First of all, thank you for finding the money for the project with the battery. It was helps to alleviate some of the pressure. I have questions around a couple different areas. The first one is going back to the emissions. I liked the chart that showed our decrease. I think I'd like to understand, is Tiburon the best? Are we the best at decreasing emissions? How do we compare to other towns in Marin, the county, state, US, that sort of thing? I don't need that information right now if you don't have it, but I'd love to
have-
follow up with something like that if
I
it's
could definitely
possible.
follow up, and then off the top of my head, we are in at least the top third of the county. I will say I think Corte Madera is first, and a large part of that is because of their wastewater treatment facility. So a lot of the emission reductions come from upgrades in that for that. But and in terms of
So that's cheating.
Oh, are we just not counting our wastewater?
No, we are,
Reduction?
but they did I forget what the exact and that this is where I'll follow up over email, but they did something like in like a while ago where it made a huge difference. But now we've done the same things too, but it's not within our municipality, so to speak. So it's getting counted toward their community reductions, where ours is not so much. But it's in our that data is also in our most recent GHG inventory, so it outlines. If not our individual jurisdiction report, it's within there's a countywide report as well where that information lives.
The next question I have is around the sea level rise planning.
Yep.
I would love to follow up on understanding how many feet we're planning for. I know there were some numbers around 2.4 to 3.4 feet. But then there are, also other mentions of up to 10 feet. And I think that was in the numbers we published in 2025 or 2022.
Yeah.
And that downtown would be underwater if it rose to 5 feet. So it'd be great to kind of understand if those numbers are getting updated. And I think the last section I have or last question I have is around public transit. Do we have an understanding of the number of we have an understanding of miles driven by cars?
Yeah.
Do we have an understanding of miles driven by Transportation Authority of Marin in Tiburon, and whether those numbers are going up or down since 2005?
I can ask Tam.
Because I think one of the great ways to reduce emissions is to provide public transit. It'd be great to understand if that number has gone up or down in Tiburon. And then I guess the last thing, I think similar to John, I'll maybe steal his language. I guess I would challenge the notion that public transit in general is too big to fix, number one, or number two, that the decisions that we made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s that we have to continue to make now. Yeah. And the deferred maintenance or not updating public infrastructure is acceptable, and because it is not. So and this is not on you at all, Grace, but I would sort of challenge anyone involved in that system to. We're going to continue to live here, and hopefully you continue to commute from the East Bay to Tiburon and Mill Valley, and I would like to think that those in charge are thinking about better ways to move people from one place to another. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, Alice, you have anything? No. Great.
That cover it? Okay, thank you so much. And we're going to be inviting you back to speak more often than you have in the past, just so that we can.
And let's do public comment
focused
just
on
in
this.
case.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Is there any public comment either in the room or online regarding the presentation? Please come on up, have a seat. We can't actually answer questions, but we're happy to hear your comment. Please introduce your name and let us know what you're thinking.
Hi, my name is Amy Davis. That was an excellent and very thorough presentation. Thank you for that. I guess the questions, they are questions. I know I'm not supposed to ask.
You can ask them. I mean,
the emissions data that went through 2023, have they given you an ETA of when to expect updated information? That's a question. You don't have to answer
Yeah,
it.
why don't you ask all of them and then we'll let her.
Okay. And then the other one, so just two questions. And then the other one is, on the sea level slide, there was a visual of, I think, 10, 20, and 60 rise. And, I'm just curious what that timeline is. Those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we normally don't answer, but please go ahead and address those since we've been talking about this.
Yeah, for 2024 data, it's changed in terms of when we're gonna get it. You know, I thought it would be sooner rather than later, and then PG&E was being not super helpful. So we're expecting it to be soon. I don't have an exact timeline though. And then for that visual, I have it on here, but it's also, if you looked at our town website under sea level rise, that visual is also there, and I think the dates are listed, so it should be there publicly available. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, we do have one public comment online.
Oh, please.
I'll recognize Sana Thomas.
Good evening again, council members. First, I just want to thank you so much, Mayor Wellner, for calling for this sort of midterm update and for keeping climate change so central to your focus. We all appreciate that. And Grace, for being on top of these very complex issues and doing such a very informative report for us. I had a couple of questions. I did want to point out that or urge you not to lower your 50% greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, because in the climate action plan, we did include carbon offsets as another avenue for reaching that goal. So hang on to the carbon offset idea. I also wanted to ask, and I know you can't answer, but I think Grace said that AB 130 only applies to residential buildings. So I'm just kind of wondering if we can bring down that trend line with more action in terms of non-residential and municipal buildings. That was one question. And a second one was, I was excited about the Resiliency Center, including the library and town hall. But will this mean that the library will be adding solar panels to their roof? I hope. And I just wondered also, you mentioned the RFP, which is terrific. I'm so excited about that. And you mentioned that you would be talking to whomever about adjacency to multifamily housing. I wonder what other more explicit and direct actions can be taken to bring EV charging infrastructure to multifamily housing. Thank you very much. I so appreciate this update and your work.
Thank you, Sana, and thank you for all that you do on this topic and keeping us focused on it. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments to respond or?
I would just, Sana did ask about the library, the resiliency project. Yes, the project does include additional solar on the site. It remains to be seen what that would look like. Some could be on the roof of the library, some could be on the parking lot, carports, solar carports. We're talking about conceptually looking at expanding the parking lot, some additional parking for EV charging as part of the project, which may have a solar carport. So yeah, it's a
exciting,
pretty big project with lots of aspects to it.
And then my other response to Sana's other questions, and thank you, Sana, for joining virtually. I hope that Tahoe is nice. So the AB 130 stuff, we are definitely looking at mainly municipal, like if there's any policies that we can adopt within the municipality for projects that would, help with our climate causes. And then for multifamily housing and EVs, in our current adoption that's getting processed by the state, we actually have language saying if they're upgrading a service panel, or if the project is doing curbing or repaving of a parking lot, they're required to meet the Tier 1 EV requirements, which require each parking spot that has a dwelling unit assigned to have a level 2 EV charger, and then for 40% of unassigned spaces to also have a EV charging. So ideally, that will also increase the adjacency of charging to multifamily.
Yeah, and hopefully the state will approve
Hopefully the
those
state will approve it.
requests. Right.
Fingers crossed.
Well, great. Well, thank you. This was tremendous. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a fabulous report. Thank you for your work.
Okay, so our next and final discussion item is on the housing element implementation. And so I requested this because, you know, there was a lot of energy and effort devoted over the last few years to developing the housing element, approving it, getting the zoning in place. We recently, as you all know, the town was successful. There was a lawsuit challenge to our housing element that the town successfully defeated on appeal. And the town is doing its best to comply with state directives regarding housing. While maintaining the beauty and character for our town. And so it seems to me that really throughout this year, we're going to be hearing from our community development department and other staff about how we're doing. This is kind of midstream progress report. This is what we've proposed. This is how the community is responding. And this is what we can expect to see when we're being evaluated in a couple of years. So please proceed with the staff report. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Wellner and council members. That was a hard act to follow. All good news there. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Anyway, so as you mentioned, we're here to talk about how we're doing implementing our housing element. That was a huge lift, and for every jurisdiction is an absolutely huge lift every 8 years. So I'm going to start talking about can't see it, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, aka RHNA. That's what most people call it, and probably what you've heard most commonly. And the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, RHNA, is a process included in state housing law. So the state has a lot of laws and they keep adding to them, that dictate how a jurisdiction needs to look at developing housing. And so the process is used to determine how many new homes and how the affordability of those homes each jurisdiction needs to create the possibility for them to be built through the housing element. And the RHNA process, as I mentioned, is repeated every 8 years. We are currently in the 6th RHNA cycle, which has a planning period of 2023 to 2031. So we're almost at that midway point. And the housing element, which was kind of the basis of this report, but however, there's such a linkage between the two that you can't talk about one without the other. The housing element is a required chapter of our general plan. Every jurisdiction has to have a general plan. And every 8 years, the town, like all other governments, has to update its housing element to accommodate projected housing needs and address new state legislation. The housing element addresses a range of housing issues such as affordability, housing diversity, density, and location, and it establishes goals, policies, and programs for existing and projected housing needs. So in the sixth cycle RHNA, Tiburon was allocated 639 units that it has to build throughout that 8-year period. And just to add a little bit of a comparison, in the 5th cycle RHNA, which was the prior 8-year cycle, we only had to build 78. So that tells you how serious California is getting with Tiburon adding housing. And as mentioned, it also allocates how the affordability of those housing units should be. And what that means is that 193 units should be reserved for very low income families or households, and then on down the list. So you can see that we do need above moderate income housing, but really, really struggling to get that very low income housing. And so in order to develop that housing, we have to identify what are called adequate sites. And adequate sites is actually a legally required sites inventory that proves a city has enough appropriately zoned, feasible, and realistically developable land to meet its state assigned RENA housing need. So it's a state defined term, it's not optional, and it's not locally invented. That's how we refer to the inventory that is included in our housing element in order to meet this RENA. And here's just a snapshot really from our housing element itself. It identifies the 17 adequate sites that have been identified in the housing element as being able to provide the number of housing units that's in our current RENA cycle. And we've had interest from developers on several sites. We get people kicking the tires a lot. And we don't have applications related to those inquiries, but we do currently have an application for a site that's not on here at the Tiburon 1801 Tiburon Boulevard. That is a multifamily 9-unit townhome development that is utilizing state density bonus and other state legislation to go through a ministerial approval process, which means it is not, we cannot have public comment and we cannot have a public hearing on it. If they meet the objectives of those state legislations and the town's objective design standards, staff has to approve it, and on a very quick timeline.
So I'd like to ask a couple of questions
Yes,
about
please.
this chart. So first of all, can you explain the difference between the numbered and the lettered locations?
Well, I've been here 2 months.
No, I mean, I don't know if you know.
No, honestly, I'm sure there is a description in the housing element itself, and I would be happy to look into that and report back.
I know, I'm just, because it looks like there's some significance behind the 9 and
Exactly. I said the same thing when I was counting them. I was like, okay, there's 17, but some of them are letters.
and we're all very familiar with site H because that was the one that was
That's exactly
litigated.
Right. That is exactly
Um,
right. And I think
Maybe town council knows or no? No?
over here is
Okay.
looking it up.
Okay. All right. So we have, that's just a question.
And while he's looking, and then we can come back to it.
Okay, maybe
It
council.
looks like it's actually the difference between residential and commercial.
But they all have to be,
So
No,
Chase Bay.
that was a good try, though.
Was a good.
I was buying it.
all right, well, we'll figure that out. That's not
Yes.
essential for this,
Figure
but,
that out.
and then the second question, which I was hoping that would help address, but in order to be deemed adequate,
Yes.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there are certain minimum characteristics the site has to have in terms of size and capacity and
That is
that sort of
correct.
thing.
Well, it has to have the appropriate zoning. So that was an exercise that the town has done
Right.
to make sure that all of the sites are zoned appropriately to allow, the higher density. It has to have the appropriate development regulations along with the public facilities and infrastructure or the ability to achieve that needed to support and encourage housing development at those sites.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll come back to the question about the difference between numbers and letters. So here's our progress to date through this RENA cycle. As I mentioned, we're close to the mid-cycle. That will be January of next year. And as mentioned, we have to permit 639 units to meet our RENA in that 8-year cycle, which would be an average of about 80 units per year. As also,
I'm sorry. And as a lawyer, I just feel like I have to jump in here. That is the target that we have to zone and permit for, and it has to be realistic.
yes,
We're not legally required to have those built.
we don't build them, as mentioned.
We're legally required to make it possible for those to be
Yes.
built in a realistic way, but ultimately someone has to build them.
Yes, and I'm trying not to read exactly what's on the slides. One of the slides had at the bottom, I can go back to it if you want, but essentially it said the same thing. A jurisdiction is not required to build. It's required to have things in place so that a
It can
developer,
realistically be
whatever,
built.
can realistically build it.
Okay.
Could we go back to the slide of the numbered and lettered?
Yeah,
So I noticed this in the actual housing element,
that's what this is from.
that the numbered sites have allocations for very low and low income units,
Ah.
and the lettered sites do not have any designation for very low or low units. And it may also be that the very low and low are within the range of, I believe there was a public transit stipulation in order to have low and very low income units. And so maybe that the letters are also away from public transit.
I see.
That would make a lot of sense in terms of the state is really pushing for affordable housing to be throughout communities, but it also realizes that to be most effective and feasible, it needs to be near transit and also other types of resources. So that would make a ton of sense without actually looking.
Although I know the CVS pharmacy is
Yeah.
probably on a public transit route, but it is not
he
allocated
found out.
any low or very
I
low.
don't think we should spend a whole lot of time because the attorney who helped me with that just said there was no reason. It started off one way, and as it
Oh.
went through different iterations with different consultants, it
You're
changed back
kidding me.
way. No, so there's no rhyme or reason about why it's 1 through 9 and A through H.
I would say the letters do not have low or very low.
I mean, there might be some
Yeah.
patterns, but there's no
Right.
legal reason why that was done.
Okay.
I like that answer.
Well, I feel better that I don't.
I find that answer mildly troubling. But okay, fine.
Yeah. I also know there's another slide where like there are green units and purple units, and the purple ones I think are mixed, and the green ones are above moderate income, and I think they're lettered.
Have we not gotten to that slide possibly?
All right.
This one? This is where we were before we went back.
There's a map of Tiburon that has green units.
About in the housing element itself.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you meant in the slides. Yes, there are a lot of maps in the housing element that indicate where it would be most appropriate for different levels of housing. So as mentioned, Tiburon needs to permit. What that means is to meet the RENA, we need to issue 639 units or at least make it possible for it to. So that is a good clarifying statement. And units permitted so far during this cycle from January 1st, 2023 through the end of last year, we've had 3 new single families and 51 ADUs. So that's pretty significant progress. And just to be clear, also, Tiburon experiences a lot of demolitions and rebuilds. Those do not count because it's not new housing. So some of the housing element programs that we've been successful with since I've started, because that's really what I can best report on. And we'll do a much more thorough report in April, but we included a bunch of housing resources online now. I added a web page for that where we provide information about a lot of resources for different topics, and they were also distributed to local schools and the library. I started a ADU survey that is actually through ABAG, but the process is that all new ADU applicants get a copy of this QR code, and it's a voluntary survey that'll look at things like affordability, what the intended use is, that type of thing. So we're hoping to capture more information about how the ADUs are being used. Is it for a family member? Is it turning into a rental? Is it being sold separately, which now they can be? We also went back to ADU permit holders for the past 2 years and sent the survey to them. So ABAG will give us those results, and hopefully we'll have some good data from that. We've been updating our community stakeholder list to ensure that future outreach efforts reflect a broader spectrum of the town's population, and again, meeting people where they're at too. We continue collaboration with regional directors and planning staff, which is a housing element program and policy. Had a meeting with the Marin County Housing Group today, working group. We were talking about the next RENA cycle, which we already have to start thinking about. We've improved permit processing timelines, which have increased housing numbers and improved customer service. So this is where, if you go to the community development homepage, you can see the yellow highlighted. That's a new tab for housing resources. And then you can also get to that from the services homepage on the town's website. Again, you can see where it's highlighted below. And if you were to click on those links, you would be taken to this page, which has drop downs with information on topics from fair housing to utilities assistance programs and everything in between, trying to reach all the types of programs that can help folks stay in their homes and find new homes. And then we were talking about this being close to the mid-cycle, and we're not there yet. That'll be summer of next year. And there isn't an official requirement for a mid-cycle except for our ADU production in terms of the housing element itself. However, HCD has the ability to do really a review at any point, check to see how the town is doing in terms of implementing it. They've started doing some mid-cycle reviews for other Bay Area jurisdictions, so it's probably something we'll get a letter despite what efforts we're doing. They just want to check in on folks. They're fully staffed nowadays, and enforcement has become a big part of their program. So what the town needs to do is, maintain compliance with housing element law, keep pushing those programs and policies that can increase housing and especially affordable housing, undergo a review if they flag us and say, there could be potential noncompliance. They could give us corrective actions. We would be responsible for that. And then, the most important thing is to continually evaluate progress internally through the review and revise type of requirement. And then HCD has the responsibility to conduct the mid-cycle reviews if issues are identified. As it says here, they're going to let us know if we're not doing enough. The worst case scenario is that they can revoke your housing element approval and certification, and then notify the Attorney General for pretty egregious violations. So this kind of tells you what, it's not meant to scare. It's just meant to, make everyone aware of what could happen if, they decide, if HCD decides we're not doing enough. Again, they can levy fines if it gets to the Attorney General. It automatically would trigger the loss of eligibility for state funding, so we couldn't apply for new grants and we couldn't collect on grants we had been approved for. Something very significant is what's called the builder's remedy, which you guys may be aware of, and that's when they take away the town's ability to enforce its own zoning laws. So it allows developers to come in and build whatever they want, where they want. And so we're going to obviously try to avoid that.
Just that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What constitutes a violation if they already approved the housing element?
So the housing element programs and policies have expected timelines for completion. And if a town or any jurisdiction has not met that, they can flag that if they consider it an important enough thing, or if the town is not making enough overall progress towards meeting its RENA. Are we not doing enough? Yes, maybe we've rezoned. Do we need to look at more streamlining or more efforts, that the town can do? Should we bring in developers for tours of the town and show them sites that would be developable? It can go many different ways.
They look at it and they're not used being don't, they predicate what they think is a violation on that, even though the town has no ability to still.
Yes, I'm going to let the town council
I
take.
think the most common type of audit that HCD engages in is when you have a policy in your housing element that that you bound yourself to doing. Yes, so an example in our housing element is for SB9 applications. We say, we're relying on a certain amount of SB9 applications for our approved housing element. And we say in our housing element that if those aren't being realized by the mid-cycle, we will look internally within our processes to see how we can encourage more SB9 applications. So if we get to the mid-cycle and we're not doing that internally, they will come in likely and flag that type of issue and work with the town to improve that issue.
No, that's okay. Any other questions on this slide?
I guess I would just say, it is my understanding, and please, Jerry or Ben or anyone chime in if this is wrong, is that if there were a mid-cycle review process, it would be iterative. So in other words, they would start a review, they would have comments, the town would have an opportunity to respond, there would be some back and forth. In other words, it's not a situation where one day we wake up and we discover that we've been thrown out of certification status, but rather there's a conversation that's happening, and if they're making demands that the town feels it can't comply with or can't proceed because we think they're unreasonable, then we could reach a point where there was some action taken. But it's not the likelihood of any kind of sudden action without warning is, in my view, very low, and I'm just looking for some reassurance along those lines.
Yes, so the practice is the iterative process. The statute is Government Code 65585, which actually has a time frame, which is pretty aggressive, but there's also a time frame that they
There's a legal time frame.
follow.
Yeah, okay.
And give us notice about problems. We have 30 days to address those problems. But in practice, it's a much more
Okay.
back and forth process.
Good, thank you.
Yes, and I had the experience of going through that process in Humboldt County. I took on a community development position up there where the city had done absolutely no implementation from 2018. And so HCD reached out and they sent us a letter saying, have you done any of these things? The things that if we had done them, we would have sent them resolutions or ordinances, that kind of thing. Because we hadn't done anything, I sent them a proposal saying I will do these things by a certain date. Then they wanted to see if I had, and that type of thing. So it's
Right.
definitely iterative, and we have made some progress. So I don't.
No, I
anticipate-
believe, I
Yeah,
see we have.
Yeah.
But I'm just,
we need to do more.
I'm just
I'll say
clarifying
that.
for the public, for
Yes.
anyone who's listening, that there is a likely mid-cycle review
Yeah.
coming, but that, the town is doing everything it can to comply, and that if there are issues, we'll be talking about them with the state rather
Yes.
than suddenly discovering ourselves without a certified housing element and with the builder's remedy in
Yes.
effect.
That would be the worst case scenario type of thing.
Mhm. Okay.
So what's next? We're going to continue to advance the town's long-term housing strategies and housing element policies and programs, strengthen compliance and implementation pathways, continue working with partner jurisdictions and agencies. Like I said, I met with the Marin County Housing Working Group today to talk about if there's any way we can do sort of a regional approach to the next RENA. And then in April, we will be back with the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, which is the one that's a big, long report for the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. And then also a requirement is a general plan annual review where we talk about not just the housing element, but how are we doing meeting our general plan policies, programs, and goals. And that'll be coming back to you in April. And just thank you for your time and commitment to helping us, build good housing for all.
Okay, so we're gonna have questions and public comment also. But why don't we start with council questions? So please proceed.
Is what I have seen, and heard in conversation, an interest in having the county actually allocate the arena. Is this the kind of conversation you're thinking about when you talk about a regional process?
Well, for example, I wasn't here, I say we, but the Marin County group of jurisdictions that chose to participate had one person do sort of an existing condition survey for all of the towns and cities and things like that. In terms of how the arena is allocated here, I'm not sure. In Humboldt County, that is a process that I worked on with them, was the directors of the different jurisdictions sat together and said, because we were heading into the 7th cycle there, and they were like, okay, these are your number of units, how do you guys want to divvy them up? So I know ABAG is, association, yeah, Bay Area governments. My guess is they probably do that down here, and I will obviously be finding out.
Director, I just wanted to thank you so much for your report. And I want to congratulate you. That was a fabulous report after only being here for 2 months. And I'm glad you're still here after 2 months and that we haven't scared you off.
Thank you very much.
I have a question, or really a request, and I don't mean to put the town council on the spot, although I do enjoy doing so. But I mentioned in passing, as we were talking during the presentation, that the town prevailed in a significant lawsuit having to do with the challenge to the CEQA analysis performed by the town for the housing element. And this is a significant decision both for our town, which means that our housing element remains certified and intact, but also was very closely watched statewide because it had implications for many towns that had gone through good faith efforts to comply with state law, had followed what they believed was the rule or the rules for complying with CEQA, and were afraid that this challenge would make their housing elements vulnerable as well. I thought I would ask you just to spend a minute or two describing the case and the outcome.
Sure, love to. So the Court of Appeal on February 2nd issued a published decision, as the mayor alluded to, upholding the town's general plan, EIR, finding that the town did not have to do site-specific analysis for any of its sites listed in its housing element, but when a project comes forward, that's the more appropriate time to do site-specific analysis. And a general plan, EIR, all you need to do is a programmatic level environmental review, which is what the town did. And the trial court mistakenly invalidated that, thinking more site-specific information was needed. As the mayor alluded to, it was an issue of statewide concern. The League of California Cities and the Attorney General's office weighed in on the lawsuit on the side of the town, and the court, as we just stated, upheld our general plan EIR. Petitioners have until March 16th to request review from the California Supreme Court. And after that, the case will be final.
Thank you. Okay, public comment.
I have questions.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the very thorough report. I have one procedural question, and then one sort of best judgment question. One is procedurally, at the end of this current cycle, and I should know this, but I've completely forgotten it, so that's why I'm asking. If we have excess allocation that hasn't been built at the end of this planning cycle, does that roll over the way that minutes used to on a mobile plan, or does that stop? and
No,
have a new number allocated to
it
us?
stops and we have a new one. And I can
Okay.
tell you from my experience of what they're doing with the seventh cycle, it's going to be even more significant, the number of housing units required.
This was my judgment question was, it was the fifth cycle was, what was it, 72,
78 or something.
78. The sixth cycle is 639.
Yes.
The seventh cycle, do we anticipate that to be, I don't know, 6 million, or do we expect that to be something more reasonable, like in the 100, 200, 300 range?
I would be surprised if it went down. However, I will say that Humboldt had very little allocation previously, and so now they're being looked at as having a lot more available land. There's a lot more green built, green spaces versus down here where our residential zones are pretty built out, if you will, based on current development standards. And so I'd like to believe, but I mean, the population keeps growing. And so based on what our population numbers are and, jobs and all the things, I can't see it going down.
Okay. And
And yeah,
I will
please.
just add, right after the process ended, after housing elements were being certified, that I believe it was the state auditor issued a report on the whole RENA calculation process, and that state auditor made some findings that hopefully will be taken up by the legislature.
Yeah, it was very critical.
It was critical about how those numbers were derived, and with the hope that when the next cycle comes, we're not just going to have numbers go up just for the sake of having numbers go up, but look at it more based on the topography of where the housing's going.
and then the sort of judgment question was, I think it's sort of related to what you brought up, was our infrastructure, again, is our infrastructure. We have one lane going in and out of town. We are not a public transit hub by any stretch of the imagination. So how does RENA or some of these other state-based agencies, how do they think about infrastructure in towns as it relates to this housing allocation?
My experience again is Humboldt County and they don't care. And actually Tiburon is considered a transit-oriented community because of the ferry. So we are considered in the same breath as Larkspur and other places that actually have connectivity to the smart rail, even though we don't.
Just a comment. There is proposed new legislation in which they define the transit areas and for increased regulation, increased demand on how housing is built. And so far in this legislative session, Tiburon's ferry and bus meeting is not considered one of those transit-oriented places that fall under those rules that are being proposed and amended every day. I think we should keep track of that.
Yes, that is a good one. I wouldn't mind if you send me the proposed bill number if you have that.
SB 6.
Oh, I can do that,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, you just told me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I bet our town attorney could do it.
Yeah,
Right?
SB 677 is the legislation you're talking about.
And that is part of some amendment to SB 72, which is,
Yeah, SB 70.
but we're still not part of it.
Right.
And he might be a more reliable source than I am.
Trust me, I depend on our council for a lot of the state legislation because like you mentioned, it's changing all the time.
Yes.
And another kudos I want to throw out there about the site that the legislation, the decision we were just made. If we had not prevailed in that, and let's hope that nothing changes, we would have had to find alternative sites for 92 housing units. So that would have been very significant. So it's really, and it was the correct decision in my opinion, obviously. So just adding that for more kudos to our.
So my last question is procedural. So the areas where we have zoned this time through in the housing element, if they are not developed, and we've allocated them to a number this year, will we be able to reuse them in the future, or are they burned? Will we be able to, like, for instance, if we were to have zoned a lot for this for this
Right.
sixth iteration, and it doesn't get developed at all, can we carry that designation forward? Just to you, I mean, I guess Site H is an easy one, right? Site A, if Site H doesn't ever get developed in this cycle by 2031, will we be able to use it in the next cycle?
Yeah, so it's kind of goes back to a little bit of if in a mid-cycle audit they say you're not doing enough, you have to come up with more creative ways to make it easier for it to happen. And so yes, we could use the sites again, but then we've got to figure out, okay, why weren't they developed
Right.
and what can we do to make it even easier?
You have to show
Short of
something.
putting sticks in the ground for someone, you know, that kind of thing.
Thank you. I think that's all. No further questions.
Okay. All right. So if the council has asked its questions, let's ask the public if they have questions. So anyone in the room or online, we'd like to hear what people are thinking. These are comments. We can't directly engage in kind of a back and forth and answer questions, but to the extent that issues are raised, we may give staff an opportunity to address them.
Seeing none?
Okay. All right. So no comments. And council's done. So thank you very much for the presentation. It was very well done. Thank you for starting at the very beginning with first principles. It's very important to remind ourselves and everyone else the process that we're in and what's happening. It's very complicated. I actually feel somewhat reassured by your presentation that Tiburon is on track, that we've been doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. And we will be certainly calling on you for updates in addition to the annual report, just to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be doing and that you think we should be doing. Okay, so thank you very much. That was our last agenda item. So any council reports? Staff reports? Okay, we have a closed session. So before we exit for closed session, I'd like to ask if any member of the public has comments on the agendized item for closed session. No.
Seeing none.
Okay. All right. So we're going to adjourn to closed session, and then we will return and report out if there's anything to report. Okay, so the council's back in session. No items to report out, and we are adjourned. Thank you.